Hi Vishal,
Hi Ankur, good evening.
good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm also doing fine. Okay, so let me share with you the agenda of this call first. I'll give you a brief introduction about myself, and then you can give me an introduction about you. Then we'll go through your CV. Yeah, that's all. So let me start with my introduction first. My name is Ankur Sharma. I'm basically from Himachal Pradesh. I've been associated with InfraCloud for more than 4 years now. About my tech stack, I have good amount of experience working with Amazon Web Services Cloud, covering majority of service offerings that they have, and I also have good experience with Google Cloud Platform, and I have done some beginner level work around Azure and OCI. Apart
Okay.
from that, I'm proficient with Kubernetes, Terraform for infrastructure as a code, um, and I have worked with Flux CD, Argo CD as a GitOps tools, and I have a good amount of experience around various CI/CD tools in my career. I think this covers most of the things about me. You can go ahead and give your introduction.
Thanks for the intro, Ankur, and thanks for the opportunity. My name is Vishal, and I'm born and raised in Kanpur. So I'm having around 4.3 years of experience in DevOps and cloud. So I have worked on AWS, Azure, GCP in my multiple projects, and then coming to the work I do, for the application side, I have worked on Docker and Kubernetes, then performed the CI/CD automation majorly with Jenkins, maintaining its infrastructure and availability of it. And then to provision the infrastructure, I have worked on Terraform, where I have written the modules from the scratch to provision all the spin up the infrastructure. Then we have the deployment practices or the uptime for the application, maintaining the scalability and the availability even in the traffics or in the peak hours. And like same, when we do have we do follow the best security practices to make sure not just our application is deployed but it's deployed securely.
Mhm.
So this was coming to my technical skills. Now to the organization where I'm currently working, working as a consultant, where I have been assigned to a project from the scratch, and once the project is deployed from end to end, I'm shifted to a new project. So I have worked as a team member and as an individual contributor as well.
Okay, cool. All right. What is your exposure or experience level around Kubernetes, Vishal? Like, how comfortable are you with Kubernetes?
Will be rating myself on a scale of 10 to the point 8.5.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, so let's start off with a scenario. Let's say you joined a project, and the client wants you to create a EKS cluster or GK cluster, like whichever you are comfortable. And there are three teams with the client: a dev team, a QA team, and a UAT team.
Okay.
So all of these three teams are going to use the same cluster,
Okay.
and dev team will have their separate set of applications, QA team will have their separate set of applications, and UAT will have a separate set. So there needs to be a segregation between these three. Dev team members should not be able to access the resources or applications of QA and UAT, and vice versa for others. And one more thing that the customer wants is you should be able to tell them, since every team has their own budget. Like dev team has their own budget, and QA has their own, and UAT has their own. So he wants to be able to control the budget per team. Like dev team should not go beyond, let's say, 100 USD or 200 USD. So you need to thinking keeping all of these in mind. You need to create the setup for the client. How will you go about it?
Okay. So, like for the segregation which first initially, like for the client, I'll be planning exactly what exactly the application is for the node sizing, for right sizing of the nodes, which will be creating the clusters, and to segregate the users for the dev, QA, and at the other engineers. I'll be using the RBACs for the Kubernetes specifically to segregate the access. It's like the role based access control, so that each of the member will be assigned to a group, and that group is used to access the cluster on the assignment level of the privileges or the actions. So this is how we will be segregating the access amongst that team. Now, as we are having a specific budget for each of the teams or for each of the environments, so uh, initially, like as depending upon the planning part, we will be creating up the nodes, spinning up the cluster, defining the resources which are required, and then particularly for dev, there is in Kubernetes, which we have, we can assign or we can limit the allocation of the resources on the namespace level, particularly, so that each of the I mean each of the namespace is allocated only with a particular number of RAM and CPU resources. So to in order to make sure the cluster is up, and the application is up, it should not consume more than the dedicated memory or the CPU. So this is how we can put the cap particularly on the resources which are designed or allocated to those particular users or that particular dev or QA members which are performing their actions.
Come again for the budget part. How will you handle the budgeting?
Like specifically for dev and QA, if we are having, and like if they are having a separate applications, so I'll be creating a logical separation in Kubernetes which we have of namespaces, and in that namespaces I'll be creating the limit particularly for the namespaces, that okay, this namespace is is being used by this team, and this namespace should not allocate more resources over a set of RAM or CPU usages. So even if the application is having multiple microservices and auto scales, but it will not be scaling enough, more than enough upon, like if I have given, so let's suppose 20 gigs of RAM to a particular namespace, so that namespace won't be allocating more than 20 GBs of RAM. So this is how I can specifically strict the users of the resources.
Okay. So on this namespace limit resource quotas that you are going to use, so it will ensure that once namespace does not use the entire cluster resources. But how will it help you in budgeting? Because the cost is for, let's suppose, EKS or GK, the control plane is almost free, and you are charged for the nodes, the EC2. And even if you restrict the namespace to, let's say, this namespace can only use 20 GB, and you have 10 nodes, you cannot restrict which node it is going to use it from. So like it could be using 2 GB from one node, 3 GB from other node. So how can you tell dev team is using how much? Because uh, cloud will charge you per node. It will not charge you like, okay, 2 GB for this node, let's charge 2 GB for this node, let's charge 3 GB for that node. So it doesn't give you that freedom to restrict a team to a particular budget.
I can use specifically. I can use like Kubernetes resource allocation where I'll be setting up the labels for the team. Let's suppose I'll be giving the labels to the team, and that I can assign particularly like for the dev stage or the UAT team. And for the hard limits, I can like I can use do if a different scenario, like different case, if not this, then I can use particularly another AWS accounts, particularly where where the users or the groups will be able to access the cluster with that dedicated account only.
I did not get it, Vishal. So you said you are going to use labels, but how are those labels going to help you? And I'll coming to the second part, dedicated part. I also did not understand that. What exactly? I mean, I did not understand. What are you trying to say? Maybe you understand what you want to say, but I did not understand what you are trying to say. But you got my query, right? You will not be able to segregate based on this resource quota. And why is that clear to you, right? So how do you tackle this?
Okay, so can I come with a scenario?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, like in cloud, which particularly if we are using to manage cloud, we are having the cost allocator, the cube cost which we can deploy it particularly, and that will be figuring out or will be telling up what are the exact uses, particularly what is exactly the node cost, like for for uh, for for what's the particular node cost for a month. And I can use another way, like I can segregate the workload particularly upon the teams, which I can use like one node, okay, one node for the for the dev team, which is the work where the workload is only deployed to a single node, and that single node we can use particularly to analyze and fetch what are the cost consumptions particularly for this node and for particular dev team. So this is I can use particularly use.
Mm-hmm. And like, how do you do that? How will you force a particular set of applications on a single node?
I can use like the taints and tolerations concept particularly for a team or for a group of team to particular defining the workloads on a set of nodes or a single node only as well. So this is how I can manage my workload to a particular to the specific or to the number of specified nodes.
Understood. Understood. Okay. Okay. You mentioned cube cost, right? So let's suppose you haven't used taints and tolerations, right? And like you just created three namespaces, dev, QA, UAT, right? And then you used cube cost, but you did not do any taints and toleration. Pods are like randomly on each node. Like you can't say like one node can have dev, QA, UAT, all pods. So in this case, can cube cost help you in this budgeting without taints and tolerations?
for for that particular I'll okay, so particularly there is I can use other concept particularly for the node affinity and node affinity and a pod affinity to make sure that the cube cost runs on a separate on a single, not all the node, on a single node as well, and it will be scraping the uh, it will be scraping the
So this taints and toleration and pod affinity, node affinity, these are kind of similar field, right? If you use these, you make sure like something lands on a particular node. But you mentioned cube cost before mentioning these. That is why I did ask, like, will it help you? Because you mentioned cube cost, and cube cost will not be able to help you if you don't have no definite. It can tell you like, okay, this namespace is using this much resources, it is using this much cost, but that is just the up CPU level. It will not be able to tell you, okay, dev team is actually using this node entirely, or that cost is, what I mean is, if you consolidate all of your EKS cost and then you find the cube cost, they will match each other, right? The cube cost total will match that. But when you're going to pay, and if one node has all the pods from dev, QA, UAT, you cannot actually ascertain how much you are paying for dev, how much, because some of the node will be unutilized. So in whose bucket is that going? Is that going into some third party, right?
no.
No other reason for asking that cube cost thing. So I think you understand now,
Yeah.
because I was looking for some planned answer. Like, uh, you know the answer, but it took you some time to get there. Okay, all right. Mm, on your, I can see like you have worked with EC2, S3, VPC, IAM related stuff, right? So how much would you rate yourself on AWS cloud?
Will be rating myself 8 on AWS.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's take again a hypothetical scenario. You have an application. It is a three-tier application. It has a front end, it has a back end, and it has a database. So you are tasked with deploying this application in AWS. It's basically um not a containerized one. It has AMIs. So you will be getting the application as an AMI, and you can launch the EC2 instance from the AMI image. So you have been tasked with deploying this application with high availability and high scalability. So what is your approach there?
Okay, so to come with deployment of the application, particularly not in a containerized way. So like I'll be having my first VPC. I'll be creating my VPCs. Then will be uh, like the configuring the VPC part, which we have. We will be having the IGWs. Then for that particular VPC, I'll be creating two subnets. One will be the private subnet, and another one will be the public subnet. For the public subnet, I'll be hosting my like the front end specifically. I'll be deploying it to the public subnet, and that too with the CDN. So to in order to uh, increase the performance of the application. And then for the backend logic, of which is the backend logic and the DB, I'll be using it in the private subnet. And then I'll be using a NAT particularly, and that NAT will be as as my backend logic and the DB is inside the private subnet. It If it have to make a call to any of these services, it won't be able to call. So I'll be using a NAT particularly to connect from that private subnet to the public subnet to allow the traffic. And particularly when I'll be creating my instance in that particular VPC on that subnet, I'll be using it if my application is deployed, then I'll be creating the auto scaling loops. Post creation of the auto scaling groups, I'll be like mentioning the sort of the desired count and the maximum count if the traffic goes beyond a certain threshold or the configured limit. Let's suppose I have defined 70% users of the EC2 RAM. If it is consuming, it will be creating one more EC2 instance to handle the load particularly. And I need to make sure my database is not only deployed in a single availability zone, it should be in a multiple availability zone. So if in case of any reason failure, I'll be having my database up and running. And yep, like for the auto scaling, we'll be creating the auto scaling groups. For the fault tolerant effect, we'll making sure our database is particularly uh, available throughout the time. And for using the security, I can use, or I particular, we should not be exporting any or exposing any of the ports from the security groups, but we'll be having the knuckles specifically, and that knuckles will be operating on the subnet level to. And it also where we can define the inbound and outbound traffic for that application to serve. And while deploying, if we are deploying it manually or if we are deploying it with any of the CI/CD tool, any of the secrets we are having, that should be managed. That should not be in the plain text. It should be in the secret manager to store all the data securely on that. And then yep, we will be having the load balancers in front of that, which we have the application load balancer. There we can define the particular path based routing for our application.
Mhm. So let's say you need to create a SSL certificate for your load balancer also, and the domain is there on like the DNS provider is Route 53, which is in the same account. So how will you create the SSL certificate for this domain?
Okay, so as like particular our application is deployed, we are having the DNS. Now we have to like make sure that there's the HTTPS, not the HTTP traffic. So like as the SSL termination happens on the load balancer, like I'll be going to the ACM, the certificate manager. I'll be creating the certificate particularly for the domain, and with the set of IP which the load balancer is having, I'll be using a static IP particularly. Like if it's in the included in the planning. I'll be assigning that static IP to the load balancer, and like it will be listening on the HTTPS protocol, which is the port 443.
No, I'm mainly concerned about the SSL certificate. So you go into the certificate manager and you create the SSL certificate for the domain. So that is it, right? You don't need to do anything else, or
Like need to add that C name record to that particular DNS entry,
Mhm.
that A name and the C name particularly for the for the certificate to apply. And like after with like not more than 5 minutes it shows the the HTTPS traffic serving.
Yeah. So basically, you need to prove that you own the domain. Only then it will provide you an SSL certificate that is called a domain validation. So you can do some HTTPS validation as well. Okay. All right. Now in this setup, let's say you also created some scale in and scale out policies for your auto scaling group. Like when your average CPU of the entire group is above 60%, it automatically adds a new EC2 instance. And if it goes below 25%, it automatically reduces one EC2 instance, right? Sorry. So there is a strange requirement. So now this question is basically to test your knowledge of AWS. So there is no direct service, I think, that will help you do this. So the scale in policy is there, scale out policy is there. And the client comes in with a strange requirement, like let's say daily from 1 to 3 p.m. For 2 hours. If scale in happens, like if a new instance is added, and the CPU average CPU comes below 25 even, a scale out should not happen for just these 2 hours, because these are very critical hours for their product. And they want to make sure, like sometimes they have seen in the past very sudden spikes, so that it even doesn't if you wait for a new instance to add, a lot of users get dropped. So they don't want scale out for this particular 2 hours. So what can you think of to achieve this?
Okay, so first I'll be checking again in the auto scaling groups, particularly with the AGs. Are there any specific dedicated timeline for which I can scale, particularly for my application or the workloads? Or I can use a scheduled freeze action, particularly, so that at that particular time or an interval, these instance should not, like, it should scale, but it should not scale out, particularly after a several time which I have given. So like if this I need to test particularly, and if this is not happen, I can use AWS CLI script particularly to auto scale it on the backend side. And that too I can perform a, like if it is running on any of the, I can run the my bash script on any other Linux EC2 machine to connect, or from my local as well, to connect to the AWS, and to make sure that particular cron runs on that particular time. Let's suppose it's from 1 to 3, I'll be setting up a cron.
One quick question. So instead of running the cron from your local or from any Linux EC2 machine, do you think is there a service in AWS through which we can do this?
Okay, so but not
Because if you run the cron from local or from a Linux EC2 machine, you don't get that cloud cert provided availability, right? Because if your EC2 for some reason isn't working, or if your local isn't working, your cron stops working. So can you run like cron in AWS? Is it possible?
Uh, I'm, I'm not sure, but there should be of the scheduled task or the scheduled jobs which we can run, or any of the freeze particularly, or which I we can use Lambda. I don't know. We have the event bridge as well. Particularly, I have used for scaling, particularly for for a particular time,
Mm-hmm.
where I can configure the resources accordingly. Even if the traffic is below, let's say 25%, it should scale the resources from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. And even if like the traffic is 25, it should not scale out. And post 3 p.m., after a defined cooldown period, the resources will be going back, and like the EC2 number of state will be coming back to normal.
Okay. All right. Just give me a moment. All right. Meanwhile, can you explain to me how would you set up monitoring for your EKS cluster using Prometheus and Grafana?
Okay, so I'll be having the repositories in the GitHub, where I'll be getting up the Helm charts, and in the values.yaml file, I'll be configuring that to my current cluster configuration. And once Prometheus is deployed, I'll be deploying the node exporters, and then I'll be going to the Prometheus UI. I'll be adding the target groups, particularly using the promql query. And there can be target groups like for the memory and the CPU usage, the performance of our application, the number of API calls particularly coming to my Kubernetes. So once that is completed, I'll be setting up the alert manager in Prometheus itself to alert it using in any of the Slack channels or in the SMTP network as well. Once the Prometheus is configured, I'll be again installing Grafana using Helm chart. And once the Grafana is deployed, I'll be accessing the dashboard for dashboard format, and in that I'll be creating up the dashboards. Like, again, it is a visual representation of the data. I'll be setting up the charts like namespace wise resource use utilization, microservices wise memory or CPU utilization, how exactly the application is performing using PCAS. I can set a type of histogram particularly. And then once I need to check, once the thing are completely fine as deployed, I can assign a particular DNS or a load balancer to that to expose it, not exposing it to the internet, but exposing it internally, so that it is available as well. And making sure uh, like as it is deployed, it should be highly available as well. So Prometheus and Grafana both should auto scale as the traffic increases. And yep, for setting up any further alerts, I need to check particularly for the cube state metrics, as it as Prometheus works on the pull based mechanism, so it scrapes the metrics. So using the node exporters particularly, and the cube states metrics, I'll be checking up for the logs for any of the events which happened.
Okay. So as you mentioned, so let's see, you set up this entire thing, and now you deployed an application in your EKS, maybe like in a dev namespace, right, or a UAT namespace, and that application exposes Prometheus metrics on a particular port. So how will you add the script the metrics from that new application inside this setting?
Okay, so I'll be having the target groups. So using that target groups, I'll be, if my application is deployed, definitely it will be having any of the endpoints or any of the APIs. So with the cube state metrics, I can check for that particularly application of what exactly is the pattern particularly. And like using, I can use either a service monitor particularly or the target group to add that particular new application of the microservice to
Hmm.
Prometheus. And then again, like I can use the same on the Grafana side to create a dashboard.
Okay. Can you lay out some of the best practices for me when working with Terraform?
Okay, so the initial practice is like once when we are starting with Terraform, we should not have the separate code for each of the environment. We should be having the modular approach, so it is easy to maintain the code and easy to deploy it in the events wise as well. So for the environment wise as well. So let's suppose we are having dev stage and prod, they will be having the same code, but it's not we are writing the code, we are just calling the modules again on that particular code. And that too should be a varialized way, where like we are having the same code, but one is deploying on the prod and other is deploying on the stage or the UAT. So the code will be the same, the what will be the difference, it will be having the different size of the nodes or different regions. So that is defined using the, we can use the was.tf or the terraform.tf.was file. So this is the main thing which we must follow. Then we should be having a remote backend, we should not be having the state file as a local backend. So like, even if there is only one DevOps engineer, or if there is a team of DevOps engineer, if many users are working on that Terraform, there will be a single state file that we can store remotely. That too we can use the blob storage in Azure, or we can use S3. And we have to make sure we have to enable the versioning option. So as the Terraform state file is having the current configuration of the state, if it goes corrupted, we are having the last stable current build, which will help us to redeploy the infrastructure. So that's the other thing. Now coming to the security and the secrets, like if we are working on a Terraform for enterprise partnership, we can use Terraform vaults to store the secrets, or like the API calls, all the DB strings, if we are having initially for the Terraform. And if not, we can use the Azure Key Vault or the secret manager from the AWS to deploy up the things. And then like we have like the basic, not the basic but the essential auditing for the Terraform code, which we can have over a several interval that supports 3 months, to review the Terraform code accordingly, and like making sure the things do not have any of the conflicts.
So let's suppose your Terraform is using some sensitive data like some passwords. So where will you store that? What practices will you use for that?
Yep, like if I'm using the enterprise version of Terraform, I can use Terraform Vault to, like, I can variabilize that in a key value pair, and then that value will be called from Terraform Vault itself. And if it is not, and we are not using Terraform Vault, we are using any of the cloud. Let's suppose Azure Key Vault. In
Mhm.
Azure Key Vault, I'll be creating the secrets for that particular value with the same parameters, or with the same variables, and that variable will be called once the application is going to deploy. And as we know, like let's suppose we are deploying an application for the EC2, so we can use particularly the depends on parameters, so that once all the things are created and now the application node needs to be deployed, so it will be performing that action lastly once the key vault and other things are details are getting fetched.
Okay. Let's take a scenario like what happened. So you started working in a customer environment where Terraform is already there, right? And there has been a change, some change set where um, you are changing, let's say, you are adding some small, very small change, maybe adding some tags to an EC2 instance. And that Terraform is deploying EC2 instances and a database. So you made the change. When you ran the Terraform plan, you see your change there. But apart from that, you see one more change in the database, which you did not make, maybe some drift or something, right? But this particular change is causing the Terraform to recreate the database. So it is saying like this database will be recreated, it needs to be replaced. But you did not make any change there. Now, what is your approach here? Basically, my first question. I'll ask some more once we go through this, right? It is a production change, and your manager or your team lead has asked you to make that particular. It is a small tag change, and it's important for them. And somebody maybe changed something in broad on database manually, which is not allowed. So obviously some high level engineer has done it, right? So you cannot like go into who has done or and all, because this tag change is important and it needs to be done, let's say by end of the day today. So, and it's morning, right? So you made that small change in the tag in the code. You saw that in your plan, but you also saw that the database is going to be recreated. You don't have access to make the change manually on that environment. You can only do it through the pipeline where by running the Terraform. So how can you handle it? Like how can you run this without affecting the database?
Okay, so okay, so
The Terraform code is in your control. Like you can make a change in Terraform code, uh, but like making a change manually on the environment is not in your control.
okay, so first I'll be for a quick check mark. I'll be using the Terraform state list
Mhm.
to check out what are the states, what are the resources Terraform is managing. Then using I won't be using the Terraform applied straight away. I'll be using the Terraform plan, and then we have the flag, particularly like we have the like there's a sort flag detailed code to check all to the plan command. To it will be showing out each of the things what exactly needs to be created or the destroyed or to added. So particularly for okay, for the ec2 instance, the labeling is created, it is showing in the plan, in the Terraform plan, which is good. But if we are going to db, I'll be checking up what exactly are the things which are changed. So first configuration, first it will be deleting, it will be showing what was the previous configuration. And when it will be showing one new to add, there it will be having the different configurations. So particularly I'll be going to watch that particular change which is conflicting. Let's suppose there can be any of the tag change in that db level as well, or any of the sizing of the db servers, or like if it is a cluster db, it can be having someone created the replicas or the read replicas or the multi-age deployment. So that can be also be shown. Like these are the like number of occurrence that can happen. So particularly I need to check what exactly new it is creating. Okay, it is creating the new db, but is it showing the same, or if it is different? Definitely there will be a different, there will be a difference as it is creating the new. I'll be going to watch out that particular change. And then I'll be again going to the uh, with the state file. I'll be comparing this with the current state file. I'll be comparing what was the last state file, where as the versioning is enabled, I'll be checking what exactly changed from the past state to my current state. And if that needs to approve, I'll be using again the Terraform refresh command to check it, or I can use a Terraform import, particularly to import the current configuration of the db which is already deployed, then making change in my tf file again, and then redeploying it, or using a Terraform refresh command to deploy to not to deploy the changes which are on the db level, but to deploy the changes that are assigned to that particular tag value for the ec2. For that I need to use the Terraform apply command. And once the Terraform imports the existing configuration for the db using a Terraform refresh, after Terraform import, it will be not causing any of the error for the db level, or it will be also adding the tag to the ec2.
Okay. Okay, so you got through this. Now it is a like a strange setup there, right? So now you uh, went to some other Terraform code. So what is happening there is like, let's say it is not production. So let's say you deployed on UAT and you made some changes. You deployed. You ran a plan and apply. Apply just completed, and you ran Terraform plan again, and it showed you some changes. You did apply again, and then you ran plan, and again it is showing you some changes. So for every plan it is showing you some changes. So what are the possible things that you can think of right off the top of your head, like which could be causing this? Like for each plan you're getting some changes there.
Okay, so Terraform is also having one flag where when we use the Terraform plan command, it creates a plan file.
Hmm.
And I can use the plan now to save that particular plan in a plan file, and then apply Terraform applied, then the plan file, so the same plan will be going to get applied. So this is how we can add a layer of more like leniency for that, like if is any of the things conflicting is going on. And there can be the reasons like the Terraform is like uh, assigned to any of the different IAM or any of the other users, but that still, that should be deploying the resource, like deploying the resources same, like getting the same using the Terraform plan file.
Yeah, this is a silly question. Let's ignore it. Okay.
Yeah,
So it,
like
it will most probably be like somebody is using a date command in a tag or something like that.
yeah,
It,
yeah.
it could be something like
We
that.
can particularly use the Terraform plan out file to save the plan in a particular file and then applying that Terraform apply using the plan file.
Yeah, but if somebody is using the date format, you'll again get some
Yeah, yeah,
changes.
yeah.
Anyway, so let's come to another question. So let's say you have to think about this, right? So you are using Terraform to create some resources in AWS, some EC2 machines, and a database and some other stuff, right? And the requirement is whatever resources, specifically EC2 and database. So we are restricting the requirement to just two types of resources, EC2 and a database. So like the EC2 and database, they should not be, uh, you should not be able to delete them manually when you create them through Terraform. You should be able to delete those through Terraform only.
Okay, so particularly for the DB, if it is having one soft deletion mode which we can disable or enable particularly, so it asks, it do not gets just away deleted, it asks whether to delete or not to delete. And like we can use the
So
logs as
understand the requirement again. So you created the database and EC2 instances using Terraform, right? And now I'm a user. I have administrator access policy. I can go ahead and delete that EC2 instance. But like let's say the account has 10 EC2 instances. Out of those, 4 were created by your Terraform code. 6 were created by somebody else manually or how many. So I can delete those 6 instances, but I should not be able to delete the 4 created by your Terraform. So just a hint, like you need to think out of the box here, like for going towards IAM policies or something like that. Like you have to create an approach. You have to create the setup. Like your EC2 instances should not be able to be deleted by other users. You are the basically administrator of the account. You decide how we give access and which policies we give to which user. So all of that is in your control.
okay. So for that I can use a specific like cloud native technology where cloud native resource deletion, where none of the API calls can be performed using the console. Everything manage gets to manage on the cloud is using Terraform only. So using that as well, we can block even a single access of to the cluster particularly. And there should be no of the like, not if any of the
Just one quick thing. So if you even if you block the console access, the UI access, like the user can delete it through API call. And one more thing, I'm not asking you to restrict that. I'm telling you like only the resources created by your Terraform that should not be deleted by other users directly. Only a specific single user which runs Terraform can delete those resources.
there is one life cycle which is prevented deletion is true, there that needs to be enabled.
No, no, no. That is something else. That is something else. So that is a Terraform construct, right? So lifecycle event, create before destroy, or something like that, right?
Can we introduce the resource owner concept particularly for those particular set of instance?
And how will you introduce that?
Like I'll be setting up, or I'll be tagging the required or the managed EC2 with any of the tag which is getting managed by Teleform. then
Mm-hmm.
I'll be creating the, like, if like this is like in the scenario, then I'll be creating the IAM policy, and then I'll be having that particular bypass for the Terraform to actually perform the actions on that particular set of virtual machines or the EC2s.
So you are adding a tag to your resources created through Terraform, and then in IAM, what are you doing in IAM?
I'll be adding like, for particular the policy where it can manage, recreate, or destroy. Like, these are the actions that Terraform will be able to perform. And then that, if we are using Terraform, so Terraform will be having access to manage those particular instances.
And for other users, uh, like let's say there is a user called Ankur there, Ankur at the rate infracloud.io.
So that user won't be having, like, if Ankur goes to the UI console or using the AWS CLI, it tries to delete that particular EC2, and in the IAM policy the resource owner is Terraform but not Ankur, so it will be creating, like, it will be not allowing Ankur to delete that particular EC2 instance.
What exactly will restrict me from doing that? Because I will have admin access, I have the administrator role, because that is a requirement. I should be able to create VMs or perform all admin actions in that account. That is needed for me, right? So what exactly is going to prevent my user from not deleting the resources tagged with Terraform?
Like, the what exactly, okay, that particular word it is having by deny. I'm not exactly getting the word, but in the IMM policy, by default, it will be going to deny all the actions, particularly the actions. But as it is managed, the resource owner will be any of the, like, let's suppose the name is Terraform. It is managed by Terraform only, but there is a block in specifically in the IAM policy. I'm not getting the name
Yeah,
where the,
it's you call this simply an IAM policy, and it is a deny policy instead of allow. So action will be deny.
yeah,
Whatever
like,
matches the resource tag of your Terraform setup, there is a deny policy on that. So you attach that deny policy on the account level or on all the users. So even if they have a streak allow update on all the resources, that deny policy will prevent them from deleting the particular resources created by the Terraform. Yeah. All right. Yeah, when you were saying about like in the remote backend state, you can store in blob storage. Something just popped into my head. Like, what is the difference between the object storage and a block storage? You said blob. When I mean blob is object. Blob is a Azure term, right? So in AWS, it's an object storage. So what is the difference between an object storage and a block storage?
okay, so, like, we have the buckets like S3, or the Azure Blob or the Google Cloud Storage. It stores, like, the files particularly. And for the
Mm-hmm.
block storage, which we have is like the EBS volume, which we have in AWS particularly to store the data or attach it any or to any of the virtual machines or the EC2. Like, that's the, like, main difference, particularly with the blob storage, with the object storage and the block storage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, you told me like that the block storage is the EBS one and the object storage is S3 one. Okay, you can read about it later. Like, what is the difference? Like, why like the object storage is the object storage and we have a block storage, right?
Okay.
So, I think we are almost at the end of the interview. So, I have gone through most of the things. Um, Yeah, just one last question for Linux. So I see you also supported Linux-based production systems. So your Linux machine is showing high uptime, but your CPU usage and memory usage is quite low. It's not like above 45%. And due to this uptime, your application latency is also increasing. So you are inside the VM now. You have SSH access to the Linux VM, and you need to find out what is causing the high uptime. So, what are your troubleshooting steps here?
Okay, so like I'll be firstly using the commands like the uptime command and then the top command, particularly to check out are there any of the process that are consuming a high load, that are having high load particularly. And if it is, I'll be investigating to the particular PIDs of that particular process. I can use the iostat particularly command as well to check out any of the input disk input output operations. Sorry, are there any of the pending states which is happening, or I can like, okay, then the next approach to check for checking up the volume mounts, I can use the df-h command particularly to check there is no as such measure for the resources, there should be having enough storage. If it is not any of the storage, then I can check the late for the latency. I can check particularly with the traceroute command to ping any of the other server or any other local server to check are there any losses in sort of packets particularly. Then like definitely like up to the point I could figure out any of the things which could be causing the error, or if there is any of the things like conflicting of the ports. Suppose my application is deployed on the EC2 and by mistakenly two of the services are listening on the same port, that is conflicting, but still that will not lead to any of the uptime issue or the latency issue. But I can still check it using the netset command, using the flag hyphen tulnp to check out the listeners and the ports particularly for that.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
there is one more like when I was more into the log analysis, we have the ps aux command particularly to check out any of the uh, errors. I can find it like I need to check out the logs, but for that I can use ps space aux, and I can grab any of the threshold, grab hyphen I threshold or error to list out any of the errors or any of the abnormalities in that particular linux machine.
Understood. Okay. Okay, Vishal. So I don't have any more questions. If you have anything that you would like to ask me, you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks, uncle. Thanks for interviewing. Like just two short questions. What's the exact role do we have here? What exactly is the requirement, particularly? Is it more into the new implementations or more into the reliability of the application? And the
So
second
we,
one will be like
Mhm.
just the feedback, like how I did.
Okay. So we basically are a service-based organization, right? So we have different clients who have different requirements. So it kind of depends on the client requirement. And secondly, like this is more of an HR question because I'm not sure if they are hiring you for an exact single role with a particular client in mind, or like they are open to options. Like it kind of depends on that chart. Sometimes they do hire for a specific role, a specific client. Sometimes the hiring, but if it was a specific client, I think you would have been told already. So, but still, this is more of an HR question. I'm not
Okay.
the best person to answer this because I'm a technical guy and I'm not concerned with these kind of things. And feedback, I will for sure give the feedback through HR. But I did like the knowledge that you showcased. Basically, whatever you worked on, you kind of understand the basics, and which is a good thing, and which is the base for us. Like I, I kind of, you kind of reminded me of myself when I was 4 years of experience. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, uncle. Thanks for the
Yeah.
nice conversation.
Yeah. Thanks, Vishal. Have a nice day.
You too, man. Bye bye. हमें Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm having 4.3 years of experience. Same. Since beginning I'm in the same DevOps and cloud, so the relevant experience is same with the total years of experience. Oh, projects, like there are plenty of the projects, like it's more than 10 or 12. Yes. Okay, so I have worked with AWS Azure, GCP, Docker, Kubernetes, Ansible, Terraform, Linux, and then the CI/CD which we have using Jenkins or GitHub Actions. I have worked Azure and AWS, so it's more on the side where I have worked. So more than 7 projects, and for around 3.5 years, I have worked on these tools and technologies for specifically AWS and Azure. Will be rating myself 8.5 on AWS and 8 on Azure.